between star systems, carrying its cargo of diplomatic personnel and cultural exchange students toward the neutral station of Haven Point. Among the passengers, a young human male sat hunched over a data tablet in the observation lounge, his fingers moving slowly across the screen as he worked through another language lesson. Kira TH watched him from across the compartment, her elongated neck allowing her to observe without appearing obvious. The Veltar female had been studying humans for the better part of 3 cycles, ever since the species had been granted preliminary membership to the Galactic Council. Her doctoral thesis focused on human behavioral patterns, particularly their capacity for violence and aggression that had made other species wary of their inclusion. This particular specimen confounded her research. Marcus Chun appeared to be everything the human delegation claimed their species could become through proper education and socialization. Quiet, thoughtful, always polite to the crew and other passengers. When other species made dismissive comments about humanity's violent past, he would simply nod and return to his studies. When the Corvin delegates had mocked human intelligence during dinner 2 nights prior, Marcus had excused himself rather than engage in confrontation. Fascinating subject, is he not? Kira TH's neck ridges flared slightly in surprise as Commander Thextal settled into the seat beside her. The massive Corvin military officer had been watching her observe the human with obvious amusement. "I am conducting behavioral research," she replied formally, smoothing her neck ridges back down. The human demonstrates interesting patterns of conflict avoidance. Thextal's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his people. Conflict avoidance. Yes, that is one way to describe cowardice. His voice carried easily across the lounge, and several passengers turned to look. Marcus glanced up briefly from his tablet before returning his attention to the screen. "The humans call it being civilized," Kiritach said carefully. She had no particular fondness for the species, but academic integrity demanded accuracy. Their cultural evolution has supposedly moved beyond primitive aggression. Has it? Thextal leaned back in his chair, the reinforced frame creaking under his considerable bulk. Perhaps we should test that theory. Before Kira TH could ask what he meant, the transport shuddered. Emergency lights began flashing as the ship's AI announced in multiple languages that they were being hailed by an unknown vessel. Captain Veltar's voice came over the communication system moments later, strain evident even through the universal translator. "All passengers remain in designated areas. We're being boarded by what appears to be a salvage vessel. Remain calm and comply with any instructions." Kira TH felt her throat sacs contract with fear. Pirates operating in neutral space were common enough, but salvage crews were worse. They took everything of value, including passengers who might bring ransom or sell on the slave markets of the Outer Rim. The airlock cycled with a grinding hiss, and heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors. The first pirates to enter the observation lounge were a mixed group: 2 Corvin renegades, a cybernetically enhanced human female, and something Kira TH had never seen before, all flowing tentacles and chitinous plates. "Nobody moves, nobody dies," the lead Corvin announced, his weapons sweeping across the assembled passengers. "We want the cargo manifest and any personal valuables. Comply, and you continue breathing." Passengers began fumbling for jewelry and credit chips. Kiriti noticed Marcus had closed his tablet and sat perfectly still, hands visible on the table. His breathing appeared controlled, almost meditative. "You," the cyborg human pointed at Commander Thextal. "Military bearing. You first." Thextal rose slowly, his own considerable size, making him tower over most of the pirates. "I am an active duty officer of the Corvin Defense Fleet. Attacking me would be unwise." The pirate leader's mandibles spread in a grin. "Active duty? Even better. Your people will pay handsomely for your return." He gestured to his companions. "Secure him." As the pirates moved toward Thextal, the tentacled alien noticed Marcus. It flowed across the floor with surprising speed, stopping directly in front of the human. "This one is calm," It spoke in basic, its voice like grinding stone. Too calm. What are you hiding, soft skin? Marcus looked up slowly. His brown eyes held no fear, only a quiet alertness that reminded Kira Th of a hunting predator she had seen in nature documentaries. Nothing, he said simply. I have a few credit chips and a data tablet. You're welcome to them. The alien's tentacles writhed. Search him. The cyborg human approached, her mechanical fingers clicking against her weapon. Stand up. Arms out. Marcus complied without protest, rising from his chair with fluid grace. As the cyborg ran her scanners over him, Kira Th noticed something the pirates had missed. Marcus's hands, while appearing relaxed, had subtly shifted position. His feet, too, had adjusted their placement in a way that looked casual but felt purposeful. Clean, the cyborg announced. Just personal items. The tentacled pirate seemed dissatisfied. There is something about this one. The way he moves. Check his records. One of the Corvin pirates accessed the ship's passenger manifest through a hacked terminal. Marcus Chun, human, student exchange program. No military record, no criminal background. Academic scholarship recipient. Soft academic. Fex Tao called out mockingly, even with a weapon pointed at his head. These humans breed weakness into their children now. Look at him, probably never thrown a punch in his life. Marcus's expression didn't change, but Kira Th noticed his breathing had shifted. Still controlled, but with a rhythm that seemed almost like preparation for physical exertion. The pirate leader grew impatient. Enough. We have what we came for. Load the valuable passengers into the shuttle. Leave the rest. What about the human? The tentacled alien pressed. Something is not right about him. He's a student, the leader snapped. Worthless for ransom. Focus on the military officer and the diplomat over there. As the pirates began herding selected passengers toward the door, one of them made a mistake. The younger Corvin, eager to prove himself, roughly shoved an elderly Veltar passenger who had been moving too slowly. The old being stumbled and fell hard, crying out in pain. Marcus was moving before the sound fully registered with the others. His first step covered 3 meters faster than should have been possible. His second step planted him behind the Corvin pirate, who was turning in confusion at the sudden motion. Marcus's hand, which had appeared so scholarly and soft, connected with the base of the pirate's skull in a precise strike that dropped the alien instantly. The weapon clattered across the floor as Marcus flowed into his next motion. A spinning kick that sent the tentacled alien flying backward into the bulkhead with enough force to crack the reinforced wall panel. The cyborg human was raising her weapon when Marcus's elbow found her throat. The mechanical components sparked as her windpipe collapsed, and she went down gasping. The entire engagement had lasted less than 4 seconds. The remaining pirate leader stood frozen, his weapon halfway to firing position, staring at the human who had just dismantled 3 of his crew with movements so fluid they seemed almost choreographed. Marcus straightened slowly, his breathing still controlled, his expression calm. "You should check on your friends," he said quietly. "That one might need medical attention." He nodded toward the tentacled alien, who was groaning against the cracked wall. Impossible d'extad whispered. Humans are not capable of such speed. Marcus glanced at him briefly. "You're right. Most aren't." He looked back at the pirate leader. "Are you going to help your crew? Or do you need me to make the decision for you?" The pirate's weapon trembled in his grip. Everything he had been told about humans suggested they were slow, weak, more talk than action. The being in front of him had moved with predatory grace that belonged to apex hunters, not scholarly exchange students. "What are you?" the pirate asked. Marcus knelt beside the elderly Veltar passenger, helping the being to sit up while keeping his attention on the armed pirate. "I'm exactly what my records say. A student. I study languages, cultural exchange protocols, and diplomatic theory." He paused, meeting the pirate's eyes. "I also study other things." The ship's security forces chose that moment to arrive, having finally overridden the electronic locks the pirates had placed on the bulkheads. They found a scene that made no sense according to their understanding of human capabilities. 3 unconscious pirates. one terrified pirate leader surrendering his weapon without resistance, and a human student calmly administering first aid to an injured passenger as if nothing unusual had happened. Kira TH stared at Marcus as the security team secured the scene. Her throat sacs had contracted to tiny points, and her neck ridges lay flat against her skull in a display of confusion and fear. Everything she thought she understood about human behavioral patterns had just been proven wrong. As a medical team arrived to check on the injured, Marcus returned to his seat and reopened his data tablet, resuming his language lessons as if the violent interruption had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Commander Thextal approached him slowly, his earlier mockery replaced by wary respect. "You are military." Marcus didn't look up from his screen. "No, I told you I'm a student. Those movements, that precision, you have training. Everyone has training in something." Marcus replied mildly. "I study languages. You study military tactics. The pirates studied how to break into ships." He glanced up briefly. "We all learn what we need to survive. But humans are supposed to be peaceful now," Kira TH found herself saying. "Your species has evolved beyond primitive violence." Marcus considered her words for a moment before responding. "Have we? That's an interesting theory. What do you think?" He gestured toward the unconscious pirates. "Did I solve that problem through violence or through stopping violence?" The distinction was subtle but important. Marcus hadn't attacked the pirates until they had harmed someone else. His response had been immediate and devastating, but it had also been precisely controlled. He could have killed all three of them easily, but had instead neutralized them with minimal injury. "You're not what you appear to be," Thextal said. Marcus returned to his tablet. "None of us are, Commander. That's what makes first contact so interesting." As the transport resumed its journey toward Haven Point, Kira TH found herself with more questions than answers. Her research had suggested that humans had two primary behavioral modes, civilized and primitive, with clear triggers that caused them to shift between states. But Marcus had demonstrated something else entirely. He had remained completely civilized while employing primitive efficiency. He had been calm, polite, and scholarly before, during, and after a burst of violence that had disabled three armed opponents. There had been no apparent transition between states, no loss of control, no reversion to savagery. It was as if he had simply reached into a toolkit and selected the appropriate response for the situation. The thought should have been reassuring. Instead, it terrified her. Over the remaining 2 days of transit, Kira TH observed Marcus more carefully. His routine never changed. Language lessons, cultural study, polite conversation with other passengers. When asked about the incident, he deflected with academic curiosity about pirate psychology and the socioeconomic factors that drove beings to crime. But now she noticed things she had missed before. The way he always positioned himself with clear sight lines to exits. How his attention would focus whenever someone new entered a room. The fact that his hands, while appearing relaxed, were always positioned for rapid movement. Most disturbing was his emotional state. He showed no signs of trauma from the violence, no pride in his victory, no fear of potential retaliation. He simply accepted what had happened and moved on, as if disabling armed pirates was as routine as solving mathematical equations. When they docked at Haven Point, Marcus was among the first to disembark. He thanked the crew politely, nodded farewell to his fellow passengers, and disappeared into the crowds of the massive space station. Kira TH caught up with him at the customs checkpoint. "I need to ask you something," she said, her neck ridges betraying her nervousness. Marcus looked up from the forms he was completing. "Of course. What you did on the ship. That was not normal human behavior, wasn't it?" Marcus seemed genuinely curious about her perspective. "How many humans have you observed in crisis situations?" The question caught her off guard. Her research had been entirely observational, focused on social interactions and cultural adaptation. She had never seen humans under genuine threat. "None," she admitted. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "So your baseline for normal human behavior comes from diplomatic settings and academic environments." That would be like me judging all Veltar by observing only scholars and never seeing your people hunt. We don't hunt anymore, Kira TH said automatically. We evolved past such primitive needs centuries ago. Did you? Or did you just change what you hunt? Marcus finished his customs forms and handed them to the automated processor. You hunt knowledge now. Academic advancement. Research opportunities. The methods are different, but the drive remains. He collected his documents and shouldered his travel pack. Humans are the same. We still have all our original capabilities. We just use them differently now. But your species promotes peace, Kira TH protested. Your cultural development emphasizes cooperation and nonviolence. It does, Marcus agreed. And most of the time, that works beautifully. But when someone tries to hurt innocence, he shrugged. Peace is only possible when everyone agrees to it. When they don't, you need other tools. As he walked away into the station, Kira TH realized her fundamental error. She had assumed human civilization worked by suppressing human nature. Instead, it worked by channeling that nature into more productive directions. The violence was still there. It had always been there. Humans had simply learned to apply it more selectively. The realization followed her through customs and onto the station proper. She had come to study humanity's transition from violence to peace. Instead, she had discovered something far more unsettling. Humans hadn't abandoned their capacity for violence. They had perfected it, and then they had taught themselves to hide it so well that even trained observers like herself couldn't detect it until the moment it was unleashed. As she made her way to her assigned quarters, Kira TH began composing mental notes for a completely different thesis, one that would probably terrify the Galactic Council. The humans weren't harmless. They were something much more dangerous. They were harmless right up until they weren't. And by the time you realized the difference, it was far too late to matter. Haven Point Station sprawled across 17 levels, a massive structure that served as neutral ground for dozens of species conducting trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. Dr. Kira TH had spent 3 days reviewing security footage and interviewing witnesses, trying to understand what she had seen aboard the transport. The station's AI systems had been remarkably unhelpful, citing privacy protocols when she requested background information on Marcus Chen. Her academic credentials had gained her access to the Cultural Exchange Center on Level 7, where she hoped to find more information about the human programs. The center was bustling with activity as representatives from various worlds prepared for the upcoming Galactic Harmony Festival, an annual celebration designed to promote understanding between species. She found Marcus in the Human Cultural Exhibit area, helping to set up displays of Earth art and literature. He wore simple civilian clothes and moved with the same quiet efficiency she remembered from the transport. Several alien visitors were already examining the exhibits, asking questions about human history and development. The interesting thing about human artistic evolution, Marcus was explaining to a group of Zalani researchers, is how it reflects our psychological development as a species. Early art focused heavily on survival themes: hunting, warfare, protection from natural disasters. As our societies became more secure, our art shifted toward abstract concepts like beauty, love, and philosophical exploration. One of the Zalani, her crystalline features refracting the light into rainbow patterns, raised a delicate hand. But your species still produces art depicting violence. War movies, as you call them. Combat literature. Why maintain such themes if you have evolved beyond them? Marcus considered the question carefully. That's a fascinating observation. I think it serves several purposes. First, it helps us process our history and understand where we came from. Second, it allows us to explore the consequences of violence in a safe, fictional environment. And third, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. It reminds us what we're capable of, both good and bad. Kira TH approached the group, her academic curiosity overriding her earlier apprehension. The preservation of violent themes could also serve as a warning system, she suggested. a way to maintain awareness of threats while promoting peaceful solutions. Marcus looked up, recognizing her from the transport. His expression showed mild surprise, but no discomfort. Dr. Kiritich, wasn't it? That's an excellent point. Art as cultural memory and threat assessment. Very insightful. The Zelani researcher's facets shifted as she turned to examine Kiritich. You study human behavior patterns, Dr. Kiritich? Among other things, Kiritich replied carefully. I'm particularly interested in the transition mechanisms between peaceful and defensive behaviors. The classic civilized species paradox, another voice interjected. How do you maintain peace without the ability to defend it? The speaker was a tall, elegantly built being that Kiritich recognized as Velnari, one of the oldest spacefaring species. Their silver skin and large, multifaceted eyes mark them as one of the original founders of the Galactic Council. Ambassador Silthek had arrived quietly, drawn by the academic discussion. Marcus offered a respectful nod. Ambassador, I hadn't expected to see you at our modest exhibit. Knowledge knows no boundaries, Silthek replied formally. I was curious about human perspectives on cultural evolution. Your species presents unique challenges to conventional wisdom. How so? The Zelani researcher asked. Silthek moved closer to a display showing the evolution of human warfare technology, from stone tools to modern defensive systems. Most species follow predictable patterns. They develop intelligence, create technology, achieve spaceflight, and gradually abandon their primitive instincts in favor of cooperation and logic. Humans appear to have retained significant portions of their original psychological toolkit while advancing technologically. Is that necessarily problematic? Marcus asked quietly. Perhaps not, Silthek admitted. But it does raise questions about long-term galactic stability. How do we integrate a species that maintains active warrior capabilities alongside diplomatic ones? Kiritich saw an opportunity to further her research. What if I told you that recent observations suggest human defensive capabilities are significantly more advanced than our current assessments indicate? The group fell silent. Marcus continued arranging display materials, but Kiritich noticed his movements had become more deliberate, more controlled. What kind of observations? Silthek asked carefully. Kiritich described the transport incident in clinical, academic terms. As she spoke, she watched the reactions of her audience. The Zelanti showed fascination mixed with concern. Silthek's expression became increasingly thoughtful. Marcus simply listened, offering no comments or corrections. Extraordinary, breathed the Zelani researcher. 3 armed opponents neutralized in under 5 seconds? By an academic exchange student? The more interesting question, Silthek said slowly, is how we could have so fundamentally misunderstood human capabilities. Marcus finally looked up from his work. With respect, Ambassador, I'm not sure you misunderstood anything. The assessment of humans as generally peaceful and academically focused is accurate for the vast majority of our population. But not for you, Kiritich pressed. I'm part of the population too, Marcus replied mildly. Just a different part. What part would that be? Silthek asked with obvious interest. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, seemingly weighing his response. Have you ever wondered, he finally said, how a species develops effective diplomatic protocols? How they learn to negotiate from positions of mutual respect rather than dominance? Through evolution, the Zelani researcher said immediately. Through developing beyond primitive territorial behaviors. That's one theory, Marcus agreed. But there's another possibility. What if diplomacy works best when backed by the certainty that peaceful solutions are preferable to the alternatives? Silthek's large eyes focused intently on Marcus. You're suggesting that effective peace requires the demonstrated capacity for effective violence. I'm suggesting, Marcus said carefully, that humans have learned to present peaceful solutions as the obviously superior choice. But that only works if all parties understand what the non-peaceful choices would entail. A new voice cut through the conversation. Fascinating philosophical discussion, but Perhaps we should focus on more practical matters. Commander Thextal had arrived, flanked by two subordinates. The massive Corvan officer looked uncomfortable in the civilian setting, his military bearing at odds with the cultural exchange environment. Marcus straightened slightly, but showed no sign of alarm. "Commander, I hadn't expected to see you here." "Nor I you," Thextal replied. "I came to file a formal incident report with station security. It seems they required additional context regarding the events aboard the transport." "And what context did you provide?" Silthek asked, his diplomatic instincts obviously engaging. Thextal's mandibles clicked in what Kirith had learned to recognize as uncertainty. "That is what troubles me, Ambassador. I'm unsure what actually occurred." The admission clearly cost the proud military officer considerable effort. Kirith realized this might be her best opportunity to understand the full implications of what she had witnessed. "You observed the same events I did," she said. "What aspects are unclear?" Thextal looked directly at Marcus, who continued working on his displays with apparent unconcern. The speed of response, the precision of technique, the lack of emotional escalation. These are characteristics of extensively trained military specialists, not civilian academics. Unless, Silthek said thoughtfully, civilian academics can also be extensively trained military specialists. "Our records show no military training for this individual," Thextal insisted. "Your records might be incomplete," Marcus suggested without looking up. "Or they might be using different definitions than you expect." "What do you mean?" the Zalandi researcher asked. Marcus finally stopped working and turned to face the group. "Commander Thextal is thinking in terms of formal military academies, structured training programs, official certifications. But humans learn in many different ways, such as," Kirith prompted, "physical education programs, competitive sports, martial arts study, historical reenactment societies, wilderness survival clubs, emergency response training." Marcus ticked off items on his fingers. "We have hundreds of activities that develop physical coordination, tactical thinking, and crisis response capabilities." "But those are civilian activities," Thextal protested. "Are they?" Marcus asked. "Or are they military training disguised as civilian activities?" "The techniques I used against the pirates. What do you think I learned them?" The question hung in the air as the implications sank in. Kirith felt her throat sacs contracting as she realized the scope of what Marcus was suggesting. "You're saying human civilians routinely receive combat training under the guise of recreational activities?" Silthek asked. "I'm saying human civilians routinely develop capabilities that can be applied to combat situations if necessary. Whether you call it training depends on your perspective." A young human female approached the group, carrying a data tablet and wearing the simple robes of a diplomatic student. She looked barely out of adolescence, with bright eyes and an eager smile. "Marcus? Sorry to interrupt, but we're having trouble with the holographic display in Section C. Could you take a look?" "Of course, Sarah." Marcus excused himself and followed her toward the malfunctioning equipment. Kirith watched them go, noting how Sarah moved with the same unconscious grace she had observed in Marcus. Not as refined, perhaps, but the underlying coordination was unmistakable. "Interesting," Silthek murmured. "The female shows similar movement patterns. Should we ask her about her training?" the Zalandi researcher suggested. Thextal made a sound that might have been amusement. "I suspect we would receive the same type of answers. Recreational activities, educational programs, hobby interests." They observed as Marcus and Sarah worked on the holographic projector. The equipment was mounted 3 meters above floor level, requiring them to coordinate their movements to access the control panels. They moved together with practiced efficiency, Marcus boosting Sarah to reach higher components while she made adjustments based on his technical directions. Physical coordination, Kirith noted. Trust exercises. Technical problem-solving under mild stress conditions. Training, Thextal said flatly. They're constantly training, but they call it something else. The holographic display activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of human space and the various colonies that had been established over the past several centuries. As it rotated slowly, additional information appeared: trade routes, communication networks, defensive installations. Sarah dropped lightly to the floor and brushed off her robes. Thanks, Marcus. I never would have figured out that power coupling issue. No problem. The manufacturer's documentation was misleading about the input sequence. Marcus stepped back to admire their work. It looks good. The trade route overlay really helps explain how human expansion has been coordinated. As they walked back toward the group, Kira TH noticed something else about their interaction. Despite Sarah's apparent youth and student status, Marcus had consulted with her as an equal when making technical decisions. There had been no condescension, no assumption of superior knowledge based on experience or gender or any other factor. Sarah, Marcus called to the young woman before she could leave. These are some researchers interested in human cultural development. Dr. Kira TH is studying behavioral patterns. Ambassador Silthek represents the Galactic Council, and Commander Thextau is with Corvin Defense. Sarah's entire demeanor shifted subtly. Her smile remained bright and welcoming, but her posture became more attentive, more controlled. It's an honor to meet you all. I hope you're finding the exhibit informative. Very much so, Silthek replied diplomatically. We were discussing the relationship between civilian education and practical capabilities. Marcus was explaining how humans develop skills through recreational activities. Oh, that's true, Sarah agreed enthusiastically. I've been taking dance classes since I was 5 years old. It's amazing how much body awareness and coordination you develop. Plus, there's the team sports, soccer, basketball, martial arts tournaments. And then there are the academic clubs like Debate Society and Crisis Simulation competitions. Crisis Simulation? Kira TH asked. Sure. We set up scenarios like natural disasters or technical emergencies and practice coordinating response efforts. It's great for developing leadership skills and learning to work under pressure. Sarah's eyes lit up. Last year, my team won the regional competition by successfully managing a simulated asteroid mining accident. We had to coordinate evacuation procedures, resource allocation, and technical repairs while dealing with multiple system failures and communication blackouts. Thextau and Silthek exchanged a meaningful look. Kira TH realized that what Sarah had just described sounded remarkably similar to military command exercises. And this training, these educational activities are common among human young people? Silthek asked. Oh yes, Sarah said cheerfully. Most schools require participation in physical education and at least one team activity. Plus there's summer camps for wilderness survival, space navigation, technical repair, emergency medicine. It's considered part of a well-rounded education. Sarah, Marcus interjected gently. Perhaps you should mention that these activities are voluntary and focused on personal development rather than preparation for conflict. Right, of course, Sarah agreed immediately. The whole point is to help people become more confident and capable in their daily lives. It's not about fighting. It's about solving problems and helping others. But Kira TH noticed that Sarah hadn't actually disagreed with the military interpretation. She had simply reframed it in more peaceful language. A chime sounded throughout the cultural center, indicating the beginning of the afternoon presentation schedule. Sarah checked her tablet and looked apologetic. I need to go help with the diplomatic protocol demonstration, she said. It was wonderful meeting everyone. I hope you'll consider attending our evening presentation on human conflict resolution techniques. As she hurried away, Kira TH found herself staring after the young woman with growing unease. The more she learned about human education, the more it seemed designed to produce individuals capable of handling virtually any situation that might arise. Ambassador Thextau said quietly, I believe we need to reassess our understanding of human capabilities. I was thinking the same thing, Silthek replied. The question is whether this represents a threat to galactic stability or an opportunity to enhance it. Marcus had returned to organizing the displays, but Kira TH could tell he was listening to their conversation. She decided on a direct approach. Marcus, would you be willing to participate in a formal interview about human educational practices for academic research purposes? He looked up with apparent interest. What kind of interview? A comprehensive discussion about how human society prepares its citizens for adult responsibilities, with particular focus on crisis response capabilities and conflict resolution techniques. Marcus was quiet for several moments, apparently weighing the request. Would this research be shared with the Galactic Council? Eventually, yes. Any findings would likely influence policy decisions regarding human integration into galactic society. Then, I think it would be important to ensure the research is as accurate and complete as possible, Marcus said finally. But I would want to involve other perspectives as well. Human society is complex, and my experiences might not be representative. What other perspectives? Silthek asked. Educational specialists, cultural historians, maybe some of the other exchange students. Marcus paused thoughtfully, and probably some representatives from Earth government. They would want to ensure that any policy decisions are based on complete information rather than partial observations. Kira TH felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The opportunity to conduct comprehensive research was exactly what she needed for her thesis. But she was beginning to suspect that the results might be far more significant than she had originally anticipated. How long would such a comprehensive study require? She asked. For meaningful results? Probably several months. Human society has a lot of layers, and most of them aren't immediately obvious to outside observers. Fextal stepped forward. If such research is to be conducted, the Corvin Defense Ministry would want to be involved. The security implications could be substantial. As with the Galactic Council, Silthek added. This touches on fundamental questions about species integration and long-term stability. Marcus nodded understanding. Of course, though I should mention that any formal research would probably need to be coordinated through official diplomatic channels rather than individual academic initiative. The implications hit Kira TH immediately. What had started as personal research for her doctoral thesis was rapidly becoming a matter of interspecies diplomacy. The simple question of whether humans were truly peaceful was turning into a comprehensive evaluation that could affect the future relationship between humanity and the rest of galactic society. I may have inadvertently initiated something much larger than I intended, she admitted. Not inadvertently, Marcus said gently. These questions were always going to come up. It's better to address them through careful research than through misunderstandings and assumptions. Another chime sounded, and Marcus glanced at his chronometer. I need to prepare for the afternoon presentation. But, Dr. Kira TH, if you're serious about comprehensive research, I would suggest contacting the Human Diplomatic Mission here on Haven Point. They can help coordinate with the appropriate authorities. As he gathered his materials and headed toward the presentation area, Kira TH realized that her simple observation of an unusual human had evolved into something that might reshape galactic understanding of an entire species. The question was whether that understanding would reassure the other species or terrify them. Based on what she had learned so far, she suspected it might be both. Fextal and Silthek were having a quiet conversation in the corner, their body language suggesting serious concern. The Zalani researcher had moved to the holographic display and was studying the information about human expansion and infrastructure development. Kira TH approached the display herself, seeing it now with different eyes. The trade routes weren't just commercial connections. They were rapid transportation networks. The communication systems weren't just for civilian use. They were coordination infrastructure. The colonies weren't just population centers. They were resource bases and strategic positions. Everything about human space development made perfect sense from both civilian and military perspectives, which, she realized, was probably the point. Humans hadn't developed beyond their capacity for warfare. They had integrated that capacity so thoroughly into their civilian society that the two were indistinguishable. The realization should have been terrifying. Instead, As she watched Marcus beginning his presentation to a mixed audience of alien visitors, she found herself wondering if this integration might actually represent a superior approach to galactic citizenship. After all, the best way to maintain peace might be to ensure that everyone understood exactly what the alternative would cost. And humans, apparently, had turned that understanding into an art form. The human diplomatic mission occupied 3 levels of Haven Point's government sector, a sprawling complex that somehow managed to feel both official and welcoming. Dr. Kira Th had spent 2 days navigating the bureaucratic requirements for her expanded research proposal, and now found herself in a comfortable conference room facing a panel of human officials who would determine whether her study could proceed. Ambassador Elena Vasquez led the human delegation, a middle-aged woman whose silver hair and kind eyes masked what Kira Th was beginning to recognize as the subtle alertness common to human diplomatic personnel. Beside her sat Dr. Robert Chun, who turned out to be Marcus's father, representing the Earth Academic Council. The third human introduced himself as Director James Murphy from something called the Human Integration Assessment Office. Dr. Kira Th, Ambassador Vasquez began, "We appreciate your interest in conducting comprehensive research on human social development. However, your preliminary findings raise some complex questions that go beyond academic research." "I understand," Kira Th replied, her throat saxed tight with nervousness. "What began as a simple behavioral study has evolved into something much more significant." Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. "My son mentioned that you observed him during the pirate incident aboard the transport. He was concerned that the experience might have led to misconceptions about human capabilities. With respect, Dr. Chun, I'm not sure they were misconceptions. The speed and efficiency of his response exceeded all established parameters for human physical capability." "By whose establishment?" Director Murphy asked quietly. The question caught Kira Th off guard. "Standard galactic assessments. Baseline measurements taken during initial contact protocols." "Ah," Ambassador Vasquez said with understanding. "And those assessments were based on observations of diplomatic personnel in formal contact situations." "Yes, primarily, along with data provided by human authorities about average population capabilities." Dr. Chin made a note on his tablet. "Dr. Kira Th, may I ask about your background in human physiology and psychology?" "I have standard xenobiology training with specialization in behavioral pattern analysis," Kira Th admitted. "My focus has been on cultural adaptation rather than physical capabilities." The 3 humans exchanged glances that seemed to convey entire conversations. Director Murphy spoke next. "Dr. Kira Th, how familiar are you with the concept of statistical distribution curves?" "Reasonably familiar." "What?" "When humans provided initial data about our species' capabilities, we focused on average ranges because that's what most species consider relevant for general interaction purposes. A typical human can lift approximately 50 kilograms, run at speeds up to 25 kilometers per hour, and process complex information at rates comparable to most galactic species. Those are the figures in our databases," Kira Th confirmed. "Those figures represent the middle 80% of our population," Ambassador Vasquez explained. "We didn't consider it necessary to discuss the statistical outliers." Kira Th felt her neck ridges beginning to rise. "Statistical outliers?" Dr. Chun activated a holographic display showing human performance distributions across various metrics. Every species has individuals who significantly exceed average capabilities. Among humans, roughly 10% of the population demonstrates enhanced physical coordination, reaction speed, and crisis responsibilities. "Enhanced how much?" Kira Th asked, though she suspected she might not want to know the answer. "Approximately 3 to 5 times baseline human averages," Director Murphy said matter-of-factly, with some individuals exceeding even those ranges. The numbers made Kira Th's throat sax contract to pinpoints. "Are you telling me that millions of humans possess combat capabilities equivalent to trained military specialists from other species?" We're telling you that millions of humans possess capabilities that could be applied to combat situations if necessary, Ambassador Vasquez corrected gently. The vast majority of these individuals use their abilities for entirely peaceful purposes, such as Dr. Chun manipulated the display to show examples. Professional athletics, emergency medical services, search and rescue operations, industrial safety, educational instruction, scientific research requiring physical dexterity. My son, for example, Dr. Chin continued, uses his enhanced coordination and reaction speed to study xenolinguistics. The same neural processing that allows rapid physical response also facilitates pattern recognition in alien languages. Kira TH stared at the holographic data, trying to process the implications. Why wasn't this information included in the initial contact protocols? Would it have improved relations? Director Murphy asked. Most species were already concerned about human aggressive potential based on our historical records. Detailed information about our physical capabilities would likely have prevented peaceful integration entirely. But now we're discussing full galactic citizenship, Kira TH protested. Surely such information is relevant to security assessments. Ambassador Vasquez nodded thoughtfully, which is why we're willing to cooperate with comprehensive research. The time for partial disclosure may be ending. A new voice joined the conversation as the conference room door opened. It already has ended. Ambassador Silthek entered, followed by Commander Thextal and two beings Kiradich didn't recognize, a crystalline Zelanti and what appeared to be a representative of the aquatic Daler species. Ambassador Vasquez rose to greet the newcomers. Ambassador Silthek. I wasn't expecting a multi-species delegation. Recent events have made this a matter of galactic interest rather than bilateral human research, Silthek replied formally. May we join your discussion? As the expanded group settled around the enlarged conference table, Kira TH realized her research had officially become a diplomatic incident. The aquatic Daler spoke through a translation device that rendered their subsonic communications into audible speech. The Daler Collective has concerns about integrating a species with undisclosed military capabilities into galactic society. The Zelanti representative's crystalline features refracted light as she leaned forward. The research consortium shares these concerns. Accurate threat assessment requires complete information. Commander Thextal's mandibles clicked as he added. The Corvin Defense Ministry requests clarification about the scope of human combat capabilities and their distribution throughout human space. Director Murphy glanced at Ambassador Vasquez, who gave a barely perceptible nod. Very well. Since this has become a formal diplomatic inquiry, I'm authorized to provide comprehensive disclosure. He activated a much more detailed holographic display that showed human space in its entirety. Hundreds of worlds, thousands of installations, millions of ships moving along trade routes and patrol patterns. Current human population stands at approximately 47 billion individuals across 837 worlds and installations. Of these, roughly 4.7 billion possess enhanced physical capabilities to some degree. The silence in the room was profound. Kira TH felt as if the temperature had dropped several degrees. The Daler representative's translation device rendered their shock as a sharp harmonic. Nearly 5 billion individuals with combat capabilities? Individuals with enhanced capabilities, Dr. Chun corrected. The majority are involved in civilian occupations, medicine, education, industry, research, the arts. But they could be mobilized for military purposes, Thextal said. It wasn't a question. Any population could theoretically be mobilized. Ambassador Vasquez replied carefully. The question is whether they would be, and under what circumstances. Silthek's large eyes focused intently on the human delegation. Ambassador, are you telling us that humanity has maintained what amounts to a military reserve larger than the combined armed forces of the rest of galactic civilization? We're telling you that humanity has a population with diverse capabilities that serve primarily peaceful purposes, Director Murphy said. But Yes, if threatened severely enough, we could defend ourselves more effectively than our initial assessment suggested. The Zelandi representative's facets shifted to deep blue, indicating extreme concern. This represents a fundamental shift in galactic power balance. Does it? Dr. Chen asked. How many conflicts has humanity initiated since joining galactic society? None, Fextal admitted grudgingly. How many times have we used our capabilities aggressively against other species? None that we're aware of, the Daler representative acknowledged. Then, perhaps, Ambassador Vasquez suggested, the question isn't whether we have these capabilities, but how we choose to use them. Kira TH found her voice. But the potential for abuse remains enormous. What prevents humanity from using these capabilities to dominate other species? The question seemed to puzzle the human delegation. Dr. Chun was the first to respond. The same thing that prevents any species from using their natural advantages destructively: enlightened self-interest and moral development. But your advantages are much greater than we realized, Silthek pointed out. Are they? Director Murphy asked. The Velnari have computational abilities that far exceed human standards. The Corvin have natural coordination and strength that surpass most human capabilities. The Zelanti can process electromagnetic spectrum data in ways we can barely comprehend. The Daler navigate three-dimensional aquatic environments with precision we can only achieve with technological assistance. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. Every species brings unique capabilities to galactic civilization. Humanity's contribution happens to include enhanced physical adaptability and crisis responsibilities. But these are still just tools. What matters is how they're used. Commander Thextal leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. You're arguing that capability doesn't determine intent. Exactly, Ambassador Vasquez said. A surgeon's knife can save lives or take them. The tool doesn't determine the outcome. The wielder does. The Daler representative's harmonics indicated skepticism. But your species has a documented history of violent conflict. So does every species that achieves space flight, Dr. Chen pointed out. The question is whether we've learned from that history. Have you? Silthek asked directly. Ambassador Vasquez was quiet for a moment before answering. We've learned that cooperation produces better outcomes than conflict. We've learned that diversity of thought and capability strengthen society. And we've learned that the best way to maintain peace is to ensure that everyone understands the true costs of war. Which brings us back to the fundamental question, the Zelani representative said. Can the galaxy trust a species with such capabilities to use them responsibly? Can you trust any species? Director Murphy countered. The alternative to trust is perpetual suspicion, isolation, and eventual conflict. We prefer cooperation. A soft chime indicated an incoming message to the conference room's communication system. Ambassador Vasquez authorized the connection, and Marcus Chen's face appeared on the display. Sorry to interrupt, he said, but we have a developing situation that might be relevant to your discussion. What kind of situation? Dr. Chun asked with obvious parental concern. Pirates have taken control of a civilian transport in the neutral zone. They're demanding ransom for 83 passengers, including delegates heading to the Harmony Festival. Station security is mobilizing, but their response will take 6 hours. Commander Thextal straightened immediately. Which transport? What's their tactical situation? Marcus consulted a tablet off-screen. The crew's vessel Peaceful Journey. Pirates are using it as a mobile base while they raid shipping in the area. Standard procedure would be a careful approach to minimize casualties, but, Silthek prompted. The pirates have been broadcasting their interrogations of the passengers. They're targeting anyone they think might be valuable for ransom or sale. They've already injured several beings who tried to resist. The mood in the conference room shifted dramatically. Kira TH could see the change in the human delegation, a subtle tightening of posture, a sharpening of attention that reminded her forcefully of predators preparing to hunt. What assets do we have in the area? Ambassador Vasquez asked. Director Murphy was already accessing his own communication device. The Transport Educational Exchange is approximately 2 hours away. It's carrying a student group returning from cultural immersion programs. Students, the Daler representative said dismissively. Hardly a rescue force. Marcus's expression on the display became carefully neutral. Actually, the student group includes 47 individuals from various enhanced capability programs. They were participating in cross-cultural crisis management exercises as part of their educational experience. Kira TH felt her understanding of human society shift once again. Crisis management exercises involving students with enhanced capabilities? Educational opportunities, Dr. Chun said mildly. Practical application of theoretical knowledge in simulated emergency scenarios. Are you suggesting, Fextal asked slowly, that a transport full of human students could successfully rescue 83 hostages from armed pirates? I'm suggesting, Marcus replied from the display, that they could arrive on scene hours ahead of official security forces and assess the situation. What they decide to do would depend on the specific circumstances they encounter. Ambassador Silthek's large eyes moved between the human faces in the room. And you would authorize students to take such action? We would authorize them to use their best judgment, Ambassador Vasquez said carefully, which might include waiting for official security forces. Or it might include taking action if waiting would result in unnecessary casualties. The implications hung heavy in the conference room air. The same capabilities that had allowed Marcus to neutralize pirates on a transport could theoretically be scaled up to 47 individuals working together. How long would it take them to devise and implement a rescue plan? The Zalani representative asked. Marcus consulted his tablet again. They've been monitoring the situation for 30 minutes. Current estimate is that they could begin operations within 2 hours of arrival. They're already planning a rescue operation? Kira TH asked. They're already developing contingency plans for multiple scenarios, Marcus corrected, one of which involves rescue operations if circumstances require it. Commander Thextal looked directly at Ambassador Vasquez. Ambassador, are you asking the galactic community to trust human judgment about when violent action is necessary? We're asking you to trust human judgment about when any action is necessary, she replied. Violence is just one tool in the toolkit, usually not the best one, but sometimes the necessary one, Director Murphy added quietly. The Daler representative's harmonics carried a note of resignation. It appears we are about to see a practical demonstration of human capabilities. It appears, Silthek said thoughtfully, that we are about to see whether human moral development has kept pace with human physical capabilities. Marcus looked directly at the camera. With respect, Ambassador Silthek, you've been seeing that demonstration for years. This is just the first time it's been obvious enough for you to notice. As the communication ended, Kira TH realized that her research had become something far more significant than academic study. She was witnessing a species revealing the full scope of their integration into galactic society, not just their peaceful intentions, but their capacity to back those intentions with effective action. The question was no longer whether humans were harmless. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for citizens who could be both peaceful and dangerous, depending on what the situation required. And they were about to find out. The main display in Haven Point's Crisis Management Center showed the tactical situation in real time. The pirate-controlled vessel Peaceful Journey hung motionless in space while smaller raider ships continued their attacks on nearby shipping. 83 civilian hostages remain aboard, and the pirates' increasingly violent broadcast suggested their patience was wearing thin. Dr. Kira TH stood among the assembled observers, watching as species representatives and military officials tracked the developing crisis. 2 hours had passed since the human student transport had arrived in the area, and the tension in the command center had become almost unbearable. Status report from the Educational Exchange. Commander Thextal announced, his voice tight with professional concern. The communications officer, a Velnari with silver skin that reflected the display lights, manipulated the controls with characteristic precision. They've maintained position at the edge of scanner range. No communication with the pirate vessel. No apparent movement toward engagement. They're observing, Ambassador Silthek noted, gathering intelligence, or having second thoughts about confronting armed criminals, the Daler representative added through their translation device. Ambassador Vasquez remained calm, but Kiritish noticed the slight tension around her eyes that suggested inner concern. The students will act when they determine the optimal moment. Human tactical doctrine emphasizes preparation and precision over rapid response. Human students have tactical doctrine, the Zalandi representative asked, her crystalline features shifting to concerned blue. Human education includes many components, Director Murphy replied diplomatically. A new voice cut through the tension as the display shifted to show an incoming transmission. A young human female appeared on screen. Not Sarah from the Cultural Center, but someone older, perhaps in her mid-20s, with short dark hair and the kind of calm confidence that Kira TH was learning to associate with enhanced capability humans. Haven Point Control, this is Captain Rodriguez aboard the Educational Exchange. We've completed our tactical assessment and are ready to proceed with humanitarian intervention. Captain Rodriguez? Kira TH wondered how a student had acquired military rank. Commander Thextal leaned forward. Captain Rodriguez, what is your force composition and operational plan? Force composition is 47 students with various specializations in crisis management, emergency medicine, technical systems, and cultural communication. Operational plan is precision insertion and hostage extraction with minimal risk to civilians. Students, the Daler representative repeated skeptically. Captain Rodriguez's expression remained professional. Students who have spent the last 3 years studying crisis intervention techniques across multiple species and environmental conditions. We know what we're doing. How can you be certain? Silthek asked. The young woman was quiet for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. Ambassador, how much do you know about human educational psychology? Enough to know that students typically require supervision and guidance, Silthek replied. Human students do, Rodriguez agreed. But we're not typical students anymore. We're graduating class of the Integration Academy. This is our final examination. The implications hit the room like a physical force. Kira TH felt her throat sacs contract as she realized what she was hearing. Final examination in what? She asked. Practical application of enhanced human capabilities in multi-species crisis situations, Rodriguez replied matter-of-factly. We've been preparing for this scenario for 3 years. Director Murphy stepped forward. Captain Rodriguez, you are authorized to proceed at your discretion. Command authority is transferred to you for the duration of the operation. Acknowledged. Beginning operations in 60 seconds. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Finally, Commander Thextal spoke. Did that student just receive command authority for a military operation? She received authority to apply her education in a real-world situation, Ambassador Vasquez corrected. What happens next depends entirely on how well she and her team have learned their lessons. The tactical display shifted as sensors detected movement from the educational exchange. Instead of the single ship they had been tracking, the display now showed dozens of smaller objects moving with coordinated precision toward the pirate vessel. What are those? The Zalandi representative asked. Emergency pods, Director Murphy explained. Every human transport carries them for evacuation purposes. The students are using them for individual insertion. Individual insertion? Kira TH stared at the display. 47 students are conducting independent boarding actions against an armed pirate vessel. Coordinated boarding actions, Ambassador Vasquez corrected. Each student has a specific objective and timeline. They're not acting independently. They're acting as components of a larger operation. The first emergency pods reach the peaceful journey and attached to various points across the hull. The pirates' communications began broadcasting confusion and alarm as their sensors detected the incoming boarders. Impossible! The pirate leader's voice crackled through the speakers. How did they get so close without our detection systems warning us? Commander Thextal examined the tactical readings with professional interest. The pods are too small and moving too fast for standard defensive targeting, and they're approaching from multiple vectors simultaneously. Standard human crisis insertion technique, Director Murphy noted. Overwhelmed defensive systems through coordinated multi-point action. The pirate broadcast became increasingly frantic as their security cameras detected movement throughout the ship. What followed challenged everything Kira thought she understood about human capabilities. The students moved through the vessel like ghosts, appearing on security feeds for brief moments before disappearing into ventilation systems, maintenance corridors, and emergency access routes. They seemed to know the ship's layout better than the pirates who had captured it. How? Silthek asked. How do they know where to go? Standard commercial vessel blueprints. One of the students' voices answered over the communication channel. We study them during approach, cross-referenced with probable hostage locations and defensive positions. In 2 hours, the Daler representative's harmonics indicated disbelief. In 37 minutes, the student corrected. The rest of the time was spent on equipment preparation and tactical coordination. On screen, the security feeds showed brief glimpses of students moving through the ship with impossible coordination. They avoided pirate patrols with seeming prescience, disabled security systems without triggering alarms, and began systematically isolating hostage groups from their captors. Contact! Captain Rodriguez's voice announced calmly. Hostage Group 7 secured. Medical attention required for 2 Corvin passengers and 1 Velnari. Contact resolved, another voice added. Hostage Group 3 secured. For pirates neutralized, weapons secured. The reports continued in rapid succession as the students systematically dismantled the pirates' control of the vessel. What should have been a chaotic battle was instead a precisely orchestrated operation that neutralized threats while protecting civilians. Unbelievable, Commander Textal mattered. They're conducting a textbook boarding action. They're conducting better than textbook, the Zelani representative observed. I've never seen coordination this precise. The pirate leader's voice cut through the tactical reports, now tinged with desperation. What are you? You move like demons. No species is capable of such speed and coordination. Captain Rodriguez's voice answered calmly. We're students. We study hard. Within 40 minutes of the first pod attachment, the operation was complete. All 83 hostages have been secured, medical attention was being provided to the injured, and the pirates have been captured or neutralized with minimal violence. Final status report, Rodriguez announced. All hostages secured and accounted for. 17 pirates captured, 6 neutralized due to resistance. No student casualties. Requesting medical transport for injured civilians. The command center fell silent as the magnitude of what they had witnessed sank in. 47 human students had successfully executed a precision hostage rescue operation that would have challenged elite military units from any species. Captain Rodriguez, Silthek said slowly, how is such capability possible among civilian students? The young woman appeared on screen again, no longer looking like a student, but like the seasoned professional she apparently was. Ambassador, with respect, we're not civilian students. We're human students. The distinction matters. Explain, the Daler representative demanded. Human education doesn't separate civilian and military training the way other species do. We learn crisis management, team coordination, technical systems, emergency medicine, and tactical planning as integrated subjects. By the time we graduate, we're capable of applying these skills to whatever situations require them. Dr. Chun stepped forward. Captain Rodriguez, congratulations on your successful final examination. I believe you and your team have earned your Integration Academy certifications. Thank you, sir. It feels good to put our education to practical use. As the communication ended, and rescue ships moved to assist the freed hostages, Kira TH realized that everything she thought she knew about human society had been wrong. She had been studying the wrong question entirely. The issue wasn't whether humans were peaceful or violent. The issue was that humans had created an entire civilization that could shift instantly between peaceful cooperation and devastating effectiveness, depending on what the situation required. Ambassador Vasquez, she said quietly, how many humans graduate from programs like the Integration Academy? Approximately 200,000 per year, Vasquez replied. They go on to careers in diplomatic service, emergency response, cultural exchange, scientific research, and civilian administration. 200,000 per year, Fextow repeated. For how many years? The program has been operating for 37 years, Director Murphy added. The mathematics were staggering. Millions of humans with advanced training in crisis management and tactical coordination spread throughout human space and increasingly throughout galactic civilization. You're not just a species, Silthek said with growing realization. You're an entire civilization designed to handle any situation that might arise. We're a civilization designed to ensure that peaceful solutions remain the preferred option, Ambassador Vasquez corrected gently. But, yes, we're prepared for situations where peace isn't immediately achievable. The Zelani representative's facets had shifted to a deep, thoughtful green. This changes everything about galactic power dynamics. Does it? Dr. Chen asked. Or does it simply reveal what the dynamics have actually been for the past several decades? The question hung in the air as the assembled representatives contemplated the implications. Humanity hadn't suddenly become dangerous. They had been dangerous all along. They had simply been so effective at being peaceful that no one had noticed their capacity for anything else. The question, Commander Thextau said finally, is whether this revelation increases or decreases galactic stability. That depends, Ambassador Vasquez replied, on whether the galaxy chooses to see human capabilities as a threat to be contained or as a resource to be appreciated. Kira TH found herself thinking about Marcus Chun, quietly studying languages while possessing the ability to disable armed opponents with casual efficiency. About Sarah, cheerfully discussing dance classes and crisis simulation competitions. About Captain Rodriguez, leading a team of students who had just executed a flawless military operation while maintaining their academic credentials. You've been hiding in plain sight, she realized. We've been exactly what we appear to be, Director Murphy corrected. Peaceful, cooperative, and committed to galactic harmony. The fact that we're also prepared to defend those principles effectively doesn't change our fundamental nature. It might change how others perceive that nature, the Daler representative observed. Perceptions can be adjusted, Silthek said thoughtfully. The question is whether they should be adjusted toward greater trust or greater caution. Ambassador Vasquez smiled, and, for the first time, Kiritish noticed how the expression never quite reached the woman's eyes. Ambassador Silthek, humans have been full participants in galactic society for 43 years. In that time, we have honored every treaty, protected every ally, and contributed to every cooperative endeavor we've been invited to join. She paused, letting the implication settle. If that record doesn't earn trust, then trust is probably not possible. And if trust is not possible, then we need to consider what alternatives remain. The statement was delivered with diplomatic politeness, but the underlying message was unmistakable. Humanity was offering continued cooperation, but they were also making it clear that rejection of that cooperation would have consequences. Consequences that, as they had just demonstrated, humanity was fully prepared to implement. I believe, Silthek said carefully, that this matter requires a considerable discussion among the Galactic Council representatives. Of course, Ambassador Vasquez agreed. We're prepared to provide whatever additional information might be helpful for those discussions. As the various representatives began making their departures, Kira TH realized that her simple research project had inadvertently triggered a fundamental reevaluation of humanity's place in galactic civilization. The question was no longer whether humans were harmless. The question was whether the galaxy was ready to accept citizens who were too competent to ignore and too valuable to dismiss. Citizens who had been there all along, quietly demonstrating their worth while keeping their true capabilities carefully masked until the right moment to reveal them. The moment when the galaxy would finally understand what they had really invited into their civilization when they welcomed humanity among the stars 6 months after the hostage rescue that changed galactic understanding of human capabilities. Dr. Kira Th found herself standing in the observation deck of the newly constructed Human Cultural and Strategic Studies Institute on Haven Point. The facility represented the galaxy's acknowledgement that humanity required more comprehensive evaluation than anyone had previously realized. The view through the transparisteel windows showed the bustling activity of the station's expanded diplomatic quarter, where representatives from dozens of species worked to establish new frameworks for understanding human integration into galactic civilization. The changes had been dramatic, swift, and sometimes uncomfortable. Remarkable how much can change in so short a time, a familiar voice said behind her. Kira Th turned to find Marcus Chun approaching, carrying a datapad and wearing the simple robes that marked him as a certified cultural liaison. In the months since their first encounter, he had completed his exchange program and accepted a position with the Institute. Marcus, I didn't expect to see you here today. Research consultation, he explained, settling into one of the observation deck's comfortable chairs. The Corvin Defense Ministry has some questions about human tactical doctrine. Apparently, they're having trouble reconciling our peaceful reputation with our demonstrated capabilities. Kira Th joined him, noting how he had chosen a seat that provided clear sight lines to all entrances while appearing completely relaxed. Are you surprised by their confusion? Not really. We knew this conversation would happen eventually. We just hoped it would occur under less dramatic circumstances. Through the windows, they could see a Corvin military transport docking at the station. Commander Thextal had become a frequent visitor, leading a joint commission tasked with evaluating military cooperation protocols between human and Corvin forces. The commission's preliminary findings are interesting, Kira Th noted. Human students consistently outperform veteran Corvin soldiers in coordination exercises. Marcus shrugged. Different training philosophies. Corvin doctrine emphasizes individual excellence within unit structure. Human doctrine emphasizes adaptive coordination across multiple objectives. Neither approach is inherently superior. They're just suited to different kinds of challenges. But human approaches seem more effective in complex scenarios. Human approaches are optimized for complex scenarios, Marcus corrected. Most of our history involved complex scenarios. We learned to handle multiple variables simultaneously because our environment demanded it. A soft chime indicated an incoming message to the observation deck's communication system. Ambassador Vasquez appeared on the display, her expression showing the careful diplomacy that had become characteristic of human galactic interactions. Marcus, Dr. Kira Th, I hope you can join us in Conference Room Alpha. We have some significant developments to discuss. When they arrived at the conference room, they found an impressive assembly. Ambassador Silthek sat beside Director Murphy and Dr. Chun, while Commander Thextal represented the Military Assessment Commission. The Zalani researcher had returned, accompanied by several colleagues whose crystalline features showed the deep blues and greens of serious concern. Most surprisingly, a delegation of Daler representatives occupied specially designed aquatic accommodation units. Thank you for joining us, Ambassador Vasquez began. We've received some interesting reports that require discussion. Ambassador Silthek activated a holographic display showing galactic trade routes and population centers. Over the past 6 months, we've observed significant changes in several key metrics related to galactic stability and security. The display highlighted areas where piracy had decreased, where trade disputes had been resolved more efficiently, and where interspecies conflicts had been defused before escalating to violence. In each case, Silthek continued, Human individuals or groups were present and actively involved in the resolution process. Coincidence? Marcus asked mildly. Hardly, Commander Textal replied. Human students, cultural liaisons, trade representatives, and academic researchers have been involved in 47 separate incidents across 16 systems. The statistical probability of such coincidence is essentially zero. Director Murphy leaned forward. Commander, are you suggesting that humans have been deliberately inserting personnel into crisis situations? I'm stating that humans have been present at crisis situations with remarkable consistency, and that their presence correlates with positive outcomes that exceed normal resolution patterns. One of the Zalandi researchers spoke, her crystalline voice carrying harmonic undertones of confusion. The question is whether this represents coordinated policy or simply the natural result of widespread human capability distribution. An excellent question, Dr. Chen replied. What do you think the answer is? We think, the Daler delegation leader said through their harmonic translator, that humans have created a civilization where the distinction between coordinated policy and natural capability distribution has become meaningless. The observation hung in the air as its implications became clear. Kira Th realized that the Daler had identified something she had missed in all her research. You're suggesting that human society is structured so that individuals naturally respond to crises in ways that serve broader human objectives, even without direct coordination. We're suggesting, the Daler continued, that human society is structured so that broader human objectives and individual crisis response are the same thing. Marcus nodded slowly. That's actually a very insightful observation. Human moral education emphasizes protecting innocence, supporting cooperation, and maintaining stability. When individuals act on these principles, they naturally support what you might call human strategic objectives. But with capabilities that exceed what most species consider civilian norms, Thextal added. With capabilities that human society considers necessary for civilian responsibility, Marcus corrected gently. Ambassador Vasquez activated another section of the display, showing detailed analysis of the recent incidents. The question before us is whether the galaxy views human capabilities as a stabilizing or destabilizing force. Both, Silthek replied immediately. Your capabilities are clearly stabilizing when applied to threats against galactic order. But they could be destabilizing if applied against galactic order itself. True of any capabilities, Director Murphy observed. The Velnari computational advantages could destabilize galactic economics if misused. Corvin coordination abilities could destabilize military balance if applied aggressively. Zalani information processing could destabilize communications if directed against civilian systems. But those capabilities are concentrated in specialized populations.